The year is almost done. We got one more month till 2024, and so I feel like right now is an appropriate time to share my favorite albums of the year. Trying to find better lighting. I thought 2023 was a great year for music. I liked it better than 2022 at least. And what I like to do with these end of the year lists is I like to do a top 15 instead of a top 10. Mainly because I feel bad leaving some things out. I love every single one of these albums. They wouldn't make it on the best of the year list if I didn't. And my ranking could be different from yours, and over time, things can be interchangeable. Anyway, let's just get into it. At number 15, we got Unreal Unearthed by Hozier. As someone who has made haunting music throughout his entire career, I think Unreal Unearthed might be Hozier's most haunting, and it may very well be the best production he's ever done. I hold the debut album very close to my heart, but Unreal Unearthed just feels like a side of Hozier that we've never seen. And it still sounds just so damn good. At 14, I have Girl with Fish by Feeble Little Horse, which I think is easily the most underrated album of the year. I've listened to this thing a lot, and I love so much how they incorporate the noise rock into this. It adds so much, not even to just the entertainment value of the album, but the meaning of the album in general. There isn't a single moment that feels out of place, and I adore what they're doing. I feel like over time this could be higher, and I can't wait for their next project. 13, I have Guts by Olivia Rodrigo. People are going to be upset that this isn't higher, and I get it, but like I said, this was a very good year for music in my opinion, so there were just albums that I just tend to enjoy more. But I fully believe that this is one of the best sophomore albums to be released in years. Sour came out in 2021, so this album isn't far behind from that, but it already feels like Olivia Rodrigo has kind of become a pro at this. This album just oozes Olivia's confidence, and it just fires on all cylinders. But it also just shows how seriously Olivia took her songwriting as well. The angst is still there, but it is a lot more layered than Sour. And in a funny way, it's also very mature. At number 12, I have Petro Dragon Apocalypse by King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. I am not reading that entire album title. I've become a very big fan of King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, and with this album, they brought power metal back full force. It's not their best, they have a lot of albums, but they've always been so great at flow in transitions, and they've always been so great at keeping the chaos going, even when they're not making a metal album. Every time I listen to this album, I just get the image in my head that I'm just in this post-apocalyptic movie. And I'm just fighting fucking giant lizards and shit. It's so cool. At number 11, That Feels Good by Jessie Ware. The definitive throwback to the Disco Days album. This thing is just addicting. It's legitimately very hard to turn off once you started it. This thing is just a very feel-good dance party. And I truly believe that there is also just a lot to unpack lyrically. But most of all, it's just very fun and atmospheric. And Jessie just isn't afraid to go all out with this production. Next up, number 10, Desire, I Want to Turn Into You by Caroline Polachek. It's not better than her previous work, Pain. Pain, I think, is a 10 out of 10 album. But it's kind of close. It's kind of close. This thing is so good. By the time 2029 comes around, I legitimately think this will hold the place of the best art pop album of the entire decade. Caroline Polachek always just brings brand new sounds and even brand new vocal techniques into the pop genre. And they always work so fucking well in every single fucking track. There's never a dull moment here. She's always just throwing brand new stuff at you through her vocals or through her production, just left and right. Coming in at number 9, I have Everything Harmony by the Lemon Twigs. For a while, this was actually my number 1 album of the year, but the year just kept going. I think this is the closest we have to a 1970s album that was released in 2023. The production feels so crisp and nostalgic. It's honestly really easy to be fooled into thinking that this was made in the 70s. There are very clear influences of people like Todd Rundgren, Cat Stevens, but they never feel derivative of either of them or basically any classic rock band. The guitar is angelic, the vocals are angelic, especially in the first three tracks. Yeah, this thing just feels like a time machine, and a very fun one at that. At number 8, I got Javelin by our boy Sufjan Stevens. An incredibly harrowing piece of music, which is typical of Sufjan Stevens. But it also just comes with a very tragic backstory. But aside from that tragic backstory, every single song feels like a perfect build-up with a perfect payoff. With incredible use of horns and a choir, that just gives this thing the flavor that it needs, and then some. The track Shit Talk, I think, is the best example of that. It's not close to his best material, it's fucking Sufjan Stevens, but it's further proof that he still has it. Next up at number 7, we have Lana Del Rey. Did you know that there's a tunnel under Ocean Boulevard? Beautiful, 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 beautiful. This and Norman fucking Rockwell are fighting each other for that top spot, that number 1 spot of her entire discography. This is probably the most Lana Del Rey that Lana Del Rey has ever Lana Del Rey'd. But I mean that in the best way possible. There's so much emotion in here. There's so much desperation in here. Tackling so many heavy subjects like faith, death, family. And it's all done in a way that makes it feel so dense. Like, I feel like I keep gaining more lyrically or even instrumentally every single time I listen to this. At number 6, Hell Mode by Jeff Rosenstock. Y'all know I've been obsessed with this man ever since I discovered him, this year actually. He is, in my opinion, the most consistent artist we have working right now in terms of rock music. And even though Hell Mode still feels like a Jeff Rosenstock album, first and foremost, it somehow makes it feel more chaotic and more energetic than anything he's ever done. He sings and writes these lyrics with so much passion, like he feels like he just needs to let all of this out. But when he needs to take a breather, like in the song Heal Mode, it still fits perfectly within this entire album. The production on this album is so good that I legitimately have a tough time thinking of another rock album that goes this fast. I'm amazed at what Jeff was able to do here, and he just has no sign of slowing down. And speaking of albums that show no sign of slowing down, at number 5 I have Scaring the Hose. Simultaneously the most what the fuck is this album of the year, and can I please have more of it album of the year. The production on this album is enough to give you a headache. Danny Brown and JPEG Mafia, their voices are so incredibly intense and honestly kind of terrifying. But it's so good. It's so good. It's so funny. It's so addicting. Despite how out of this fucking world this album sounds, it's still one of the catchiest albums of the year. Maybe one of the catchiest rap albums in years. Maybe ever. It lives up to its title. It scares the hoes. This hoe was scared, and this hoe loved being scared. At number 4, I have Foo Fighters, But Here We Are. I've been thinking about this. This is the best rock album of the 2020s, and I, honest to God, don't see anything topping it. It's easily one of the most emotional rock albums, probably of the century. But even with the most dire of circumstances, this album being about the death of Taylor Hawkins and Dave Grohl's mother, it feels like the mantra, first and foremost, was always, we still need to keep this loud. Because that's what Taylor would have wanted, and that's what his mother would have wanted. And with all of that, this album feels like a grand finale for both of them. With Foo Fighters going very experimental, especially in the song The Teacher. And Foo Fighters also going in a more noise direction. This is an album made so that someone in heaven can hear you. At number 3, Ooh Rap Aya by George Clanton. This very well may be not only my favorite production of the year, It may be my favorite production of the decade. It is loud, it is boisterous, it is psychedelic. And even though this sounds like something we haven't heard before, it also still feels like a tribute to the 90s. Like this album feels like it could have come out in the 90s. But to my knowledge at least, there are not a lot of 90s albums that sound like this. I don't know how that works, but apparently George Clanton just made some potion somewhere to make that possible. Every single fucking song on this album is an earworm. Every single one. Yeah, there are tracks on here that I like more than others, absolutely. Fucking I've Been Young is my favorite song of the year. But every single song on here deserves a shout out. They're so much fun, but they're so emotional, and it never lets up. Every single choice made within this album was for the better. At number 2, This Land is Inhospitable and So Are We by Mitski. Y'all know that I'm a Mitski stan, and I loved every single project that she's made. This is her best. This is above and beyond her best. This album just feels so cinematic. Mitski's songwriting here makes me feel like an entire movie is just playing in my head. A very sad movie at that, but a movie that just feels like an instant favorite. And that's because of how organic and raw this album is. And how gentle and somber the instrumentation is. I don't know how this works, but this album simultaneously goes so slow and so fast all at the same time. It's a short album, and I wish it were longer. But there isn't an ounce of fat in this. Everything feels so perfectly placed. It feels so perfectly paced. And I couldn't be more than happy with how this turned out. I don't care if you're someone who likes music that's like, I don't know, Scaring the Hose or Hell Mode. I don't care if you're somebody that doesn't like music that is somber. I dare you not to appreciate this. But my number 1 album of the year, and I guess this is kind of an unpopular pick, Norm by Andy Schaaf is my number 1 album of the year. It's easily my favorite sounding album of the year. Andy Schaaf made one of my favorite albums of all time, that being The Party, which had like a really cool and smoky atmosphere to it. This keeps that cool atmosphere to it, but adds such a dreamlike quality to it. And a lot of albums have a dreamlike quality to them. Like the Mitski album has a dreamlike quality to it. But with Norm, it gives me such a feeling of nostalgia. A kind of bittersweet nostalgia at that. And Andy's vocals are just the cherry on top. You know, he's always been someone who has like a very quiet voice. But here, I can't imagine this album working without it. It relaxes you, but also just somehow keeps you engaged. And that might have to do with his songwriting or just how perfectly on pitch, in tune he is with this production. But I love it. I love it so much. This album is the very definition of it was made for me. And some of you may not like it. That's fine. I adore it. Sorry that was so long, but what are your favorite albums of the year?